What's that? Look at us this morning. Good morning, everybody. And welcome to the service of worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson. I'm Jamelia Omar. I'm our sabbatical leave minister for another week. Reverend Bethany comes back on September 3rd, so I hope you'll be here for that. As we begin today, a few of our regular announcements and updates. Our requirement to mask during worship and concurrent religious education has still been removed. You're always welcome to wear a mask, and we do ask that if you are feeling sick, that you do stay home and join us as our friends online have today. Visitors, I extend a special welcome to you. Please join us in the Welcome Center if you're here in person. Feel free to light up the chat if you're online. There should be a guest information card posted in YouTube at some point that you're welcome to fill out and get connected with us more deeply. And the bathrooms and construction, there's no real updates except we took out more brick from the back wall to put in a new door. So at some point, hopefully we'll be able to go and wander around there. But the bathrooms over in Goddard are open if we need overflow bathrooms today. So we're making progress, always making progress. It's very exciting. In so many existing ways and so many ways we still dream of, our community is as varied as the blooms of the Sonoran Desert. Whoever you are, wherever you have been, wherever you are going, and whoever you are becoming, we welcome you here today. In the spirit of welcome, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to turn to a neighbor, hopefully somebody you did not come in with today. Make sure you introduce yourself, say your name, light up our chat, put your name in there, and here's your question. Short question, not going to give you a whole lot of time. What is your favorite book or movie? Fiction, nonfiction, favorite book or movie? So your name and your favorite text. Okay, ready? Go. Find some. Okay, how many of us had a hard time narrowing it down to one? So please feel free to continue these conversations in social hour, which will happen right here after service today. once upon a time. I think all the best stories start once upon a time, because once upon a time stories can be true or not true or kind of true or true in a way true. Today I want to tell us a story called The Storyteller, appropriately enough, and it starts once upon a time. So once upon a time, a long, long time ago, like a pearl around a grain of sand in the fertile kingdom of Morocco, it formed near the edge of the great dry Sahara. It had fountains of cool, delicious water to quench the thirst of the desert and the storytellers to bring people together. But as that kingdom grew and life became easier, the people forgot to fear the desert. Soon they forgot the fountains and they forgot the storytellers too, and one by one the voices of the storytellers were drowned out by noise and age, and the fountains dried up. As the last fountain dried far away in the Sahara, the sands of the great winds began to stir. At that same moment, in the hot, dry south of the kingdom, a thirsty young boy made his way through the clamor and smoke of the great square to look for a drink, but no one had any water to give. Our fountains have run dry, the last water seller said, but here, take one of my brass cups. If you find water, drink and share with others. As the boy walked home, a voice called out to him, "My boy, are you looking for something to drink?" A withered old man was perched on the edge of a dry fountain. The boy says, "But that fountain is dry." The man's face cracked like dry mud to reveal a toothless grin. "Sit down, my boy," he said, "and your thirst shall be quenched." Friends, sit down today and your thirst shall be quenched. Sit down today and your thirst will be intensified, quickened, angered, confused. We come to this place on Sundays, yes, to hear the stories that give us comfort and quietude, and to hear those stories that ask us not to sit in comfort but in agitation, that spur us to action. As Adam Slates writes, we gather this morning as one community, a community united by common ideals, justice, love, freedom, diversity, mutual care, equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual, each one of us with our own story, our needs, our strengths, and our faults. So join us today as we say these chalice lighting words. We light our chalice today in honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives within each of us. If you have a chalice or candle at home, we invite you to light that with us now.
What gift can we bring? What present, what token?
Okay, so where were we in our story? Where were we? Our boy, our old man. Brass cup, very important. We'll be quenched. Thank you, watercolor. Okay. So the old man's voice rumbled like a spring from deep within the earth, and he began. Not so long ago, there was a terrible drought in the nearby villages. All the rivers and streams had run dry. Yet one family always had enough to drink, and they shared with anyone who asked. One cunning neighbor decided to sneak her young daughter into the family house to learn their secret. Oh no. There, this young girl met a blind woman. Pretending to be the woman's granddaughter, she asked in her sweetest voice, "Won't you please tell me why your family always has water?" The blind woman laughed a gravelly voice. "Ha ha, our family has never been in want of water, thanks to the great blue bird that lives in our courtyard. I was given this bird by my mother, and she by hers, and so on for 1,000 years. And the glittering bird has always flown away, found us water, no matter how dry the land becomes." But, the girl asks, where did the bird come from? The blind woman smiled and replied, well, that is a story for another day. As the old man uttered these last words to the boy at the fountain, the boy discovered that his brass cup was full of cool, clear water. He gasped and looked up at the storyteller. But what about the bird? The boy asked. "Come back tomorrow, and I'll tell you the story of the glorious blue water bird." The boy gulped down his water and rushed home. And meanwhile, far away in the Sahara, the wind swirled into an enormous sandstorm.
Good morning. My name is Watercolor Golightly, and I'm your worship associate today. Our earth is strong. It can hold our pain, our joy, our love, our anger, and our shared bowl, which we use for joys and sorrows each week, is strong enough to hold the big rocks, our collective celebrations and grief, and also the smaller stones that will be added to signify our individual joys and sorrows. Let us remember those people in the desert who came to this place before us. We honor the Hohokam, the Yavapai, the Tohono O'odham, the Yakai, the Yaqui, and the people who no longer exist here as tribal entities. We who live in the desert know that water is life, and it's a scarce resource. Let us remember those who are walking through our desert right now without access to water. We pour water from a plastic jug similar to the ones used by those seeking to assure greater access to water in our deserts, like our ministry partner, No More Deaths. If you have a joy or sorrow to share with us today, I invite you to go to menti.com and put in the code that's up on the screen. And if any of you in the sanctuary would like someone to help you with that, Brian Moon is available and has it probably already up on his screen. And he can help you put it in so we can read it out loud and share it together. And for those of you in person, I also invite you to come up to the table and create ripples in our bowl. By putting a stone in the water to symbolize your joy and your sorrow, to utilize the space best, we ask that we make a line through the middle. That just seems to go a little faster.
guess we're going to stay an extra day because we're not driving through a hurricane to get to Los Angeles. So my joy is, of course, Coral's a dear friend, and she's going to let us stay another day. Glad to be here. Thank you.
In our Menti today, please give me patience and understanding for those that are hurting like I am. I know they want to help. Celebrating friends, both old and newly discovered, always. For the joys and sorrows held in our hearts and not spoken today, we add stones. Spirit of life, I give thanks for the opportunities to love that present themselves in turmoil in life, where the light catches the tear of another's eyes, where hands are held and there are moments without words. Let there be present then and alive to the possibility of changing. Let us seek to make another's well-being the object of our concern. Let us seek to be present to another's pain, to bathe another's wounds, to hear another's sadness, to celebrate another's success, and to allow the other's story to change our own. With this in our hearts, let us take a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone who shared. Can we remember where we were in our story?
Sandstorm.
Sandstorm was outside the village walls. Where was our boy? Coming back tomorrow. Story for another day. And guess what? The next morning, the boy came back. He woke at dawn and ran to meet the storyteller at the fountain again. The old man said, "Would you like to hear the story of the glorious blue water bird?"
Yes.
Obviously. The boy nodded and the old man began. The next day, the little girl who had snuck into the neighbor's house asked the blind woman again, "Where did that bird come from?" "Ah, yes," the woman says, "many years ago, my great-great-grandmother's great-great-grandmother was a carpet weaver. Our village had a terrible drought and people had to travel far to find water. Then one day," the stranger said, "a very old woman walked into the weaver's home with a bundle wrapped in cloth. 'My dear, are you thirsty?' the stranger asked. 'My, yes,' the weaver, the great-great-great-great-great-grandmother said. 'We haven't a drop in our whole village.' The stranger smiled and unwrapped her bundle to reveal a spindle of the most beautiful, shimmering blue yarn. 'I was once a weaver as well,' she said, 'but I have grown old and I can no longer trust my hands. Please take this yarn and create something for the people to hope for. And I promise your thirst will be quenched.' "But where did you come by this beautiful yarn?" my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother asked. The stranger chuckled and replied, "Ah, well, that is a story for another day." And she left. The old man at the fountain smiled again, and the boy looked in his cup, and his brass cup was again full of cold, clear, blue water. "But what about the yarn?" the boy asked. "Come back tomorrow," the old man said, "and I shall tell you the story of the miraculous yarn." This time the boy drank his water and headed home. And meanwhile, far away in the Sahara, the sandstorm gathered momentum. It grew and it blocked out the sun.
I was so caught up in the story, I almost forgot to stand up. Would you respond in song, "BR is a religion," from the seats? Oh, as you will.
One Sunday each month is designated as Share the Plate Sunday. That's today. On this Sunday, we give half of the non-pledge collection to a community organization whose mission we support. Generosity is a spiritual practice, and Share the Plate is an expression of our mission. This month, the Unitarian Universal Service Committee, UUSC, is our Share the Plate recipient, and we have a little video to tell you more about them.
UUSC is an international human rights organization. We're grounded in the principles of Unitarian Universalism and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At UUSC, we seek to advance human rights, dismantle systems of oppression, and uphold the inherent dignity and worth of every human being.
Founded in 1940, UUSC addresses the needs of people who've been ignored or overlooked, working in places where the larger aid agencies often do not.
We are committed to building upon a legacy that is rooted in locally led initiatives, working hand in hand, eye to eye, and heart to heart with community leaders and grassroots organizations in the United States and around the world.
Today, UUSC has over 30,000 members, partnering with more than 40 grassroots organizations. Our programs span across 20 countries in Asia, the South Pacific, Central America, and the United States.
We do our work in 3 ways: through advocacy and action with UU congregations, UUSC members, and our incredible volunteers; through education and experiences with the UU College of Social Justice; and through grant-making, convenings, and collaborative research.
With our partners, we address human rights issues including disaster justice, emergency relief in the face of natural or human-made crises, climate action, working with communities who are losing their homes due to climate change, and criminalization, partnering with communities who are targeted simply for their activism or being who they are: immigrants, LGBTQ people, and ethnic and religious minorities.
We know that UUSC members expect us to always be learning and be bold in our programming and our commitment to human rights.
We want you to have confidence in our work. UUSC is a terrific investment for your philanthropic support. Our budget goes far to accomplish so much for human rights in the US and around the world.
And for 10 years running, UUSC has earned 4 stars, the highest possible rating from Charity Navigator, because of our effectiveness and fiscal transparency.
It is an exciting time at UUSC. We are grateful to you and to all of our members for your partnership and for putting your faith in us. You make our work possible.
Half the amount of all checks made out to UUCT that have Share the Plate written in the memo line, as well as half of all cash donations, will go to UUSC. If Share the Plate is not written in the memo line, the check will not be split. If you are joining us virtually, hi everyone at home, you can send a check to the church office and write Share the Plate in the memo line, or you can give online at uuctucson.org/donate. If you give online, make sure to indicate once again that it says Share the Plate in the memo. This church is supported by voluntary generosity of all that join us. The offering will now be given and received with grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and value. What will you take from this place today? Will it be the message, the music, the story, the inspirational words? And can you leave a symbolic part of yourself? An offering of the willing will be accepted with love and reverence. And the ushers will now come down the aisle to take donations. So where were we? In our story? Thread. The yarn. What was the task? The woman was tasked, the weaver was tasked with to make out of the yarn.
Something to give hope.
Something to bring hope, right? So the boy came back the next day to the fountain, eager to hear the rest of the story. The storyteller cleared his throat and his voice poured out. The next day, the old woman returned to the weaver's home, who was struggling with the yarn. "I don't know how to begin," the weaver said. "It is as if my mind unravels in front of the loom." "Ah, yes," said the stranger. "You must first find hope for yourself, and then you can weave it for others. Let me tell you the story of this miraculous yarn." The stranger began, "When I was young and beautiful, I was a princess, and I was to marry a prince. I did not love him. So the night before my wedding, I escaped into the desert with only my camel and my life. I wandered across the dunes for so long that I could no longer count the number of days. I thought myself near death, until there appeared what I thought must surely be a mirage. There in a deep valley was a loom and an enormous pile of yarn of every color. I collapsed in the sand and wept in despair, yet as I stared at the yarn, I noticed a blue shimmer, and I began to hope. I picked up the end of the sparkling blue yarn you see here, and I began to weave it into a carpet of shimmering blue. Within hours, I had woven the finest carpet in the land. I laid it out in the center of the valley and I fell asleep. When I awoke, the carpet had transformed. It had turned into a beautiful, clear pool, and I drank until I could take no more. Renewed, I sat in front of the loom and I began to weave again. This time, the red became clay for houses to keep me safe from the sand and wind. The emerald green became a grove of palm trees to give me shade. The bright gold and copper for juicy dates to keep me fed and satisfy my hunger. I kept weaving until I had birthed an entire kingdom. When I was finished, the only yarn left was the spindle of blue, which never seemed to run out. With tears in her eyes, the carpet weaver smiled at the stranger. Then she gathered the women of her family, and in a flurry they began tying knots one by one. The yarn came alive in their fingers, and soon a glorious bird awakened and emerged from the loom. It burst out the door with a buoyant cry and disappeared into the sky. And then it returned only moments later carrying buckets full of fresh, clean water and poured it into the well. Again and again, this bird flew away and flew back with buckets of water. The well overflowed, and the village was saved. The neighbor girl thanked the old woman for her story, and she crept to the door to tell her mother, who hatched a plan to steal the bird. Late that night, the mother snuck into the neighbor's courtyard. There she spied the most beautiful creature she had ever seen, glistening like sapphire in the moonlight. She fell to her knees and wept. The family came out to the courtyard to find their neighbor in their courtyard. "Good neighbor, why do you weep? And why are you in our home?" The neighbor replied, "In greed. I came to steal this bird, but once its presence, I was filled with hope instead. Reflected in its feathers, I saw my own face." The family brought her inside, and they shared a pot of sweet tea with fresh mint and dried her eyes. No one ever tried to steal the bird again, and the village never again went without water. When the old man finished this, the boy's brass cup again overflowed with cool, clear, blue water. The boy sipped from it, and this time poured the rest into the fountain. At that very moment, the sandstorm from the Sahara arrived at the city gates in the form of an enormous jinn, right? A genie or a demon or a spirit. His voice boomed across the trembling walls. "I am the desert, and now your fountains are gone. I shall destroy your city at sundown and make you part of the desert again." Until the boy and the storyteller smiled at each other, and the boy ran to the gate. "Oh, mighty Sahara," he says, "before you destroy us, let me tell you a tale, and perhaps you will reconsider." "I have made up my mind," says the jinn, "but you may continue. I will destroy your city at sundown." And so the boy began the tale of the endless drought. The jinn was intrigued and failed to notice the sun setting. "But what about the bird?" he asked the boy when he was finished. It was nearly dark now, and a small circle of people had begun to form. "Ah, well, that is a story for another day. If you spare our city tonight, tomorrow I will tell you the tale of the glorious blue water bird." The jinn agreed and faded into the desert for the night. Now I'm going to walk up here. So, once upon a time, right? Magical words. They always invoke possibility and hope like the blue thread. They invoke a world beyond our own, one that is not necessarily better than our world, but one that I know comes built in the end, when all of the conflict and all of the strife is resolved. A world where there is certainty. And saying that I crave certainty and that I love stories because there is certainty feels kind of anti-you, right? Because we're a people that come in the middle of a story. We are a faith of uncertainty. We revel in the gray area, in the in-between, in the we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I think that's part of what it means to be a living tradition. Revelation is always coming. We don't know who we will be tomorrow, or where we will be, or what will be required of us, or how we will meet the world to come. Ours is a faith that is always in the middle, asking more questions and finding new answers as we go along. Returning once again to once upon a time where we can imagine and work towards any world into being. So what would we dream? What would we dream into being? One side of this, though, storytelling, is telling the story. The other side is listening to them, hearing the stories that those around us also want to dream into being. Unitarian and then UU minister Jacob Trapp wrote, if it is language that makes us human, one half of language is to listen. Silence can exist without speech, but speech cannot live without silence. Listen to the speech of others. Listen even more to their silence. So in our world today, whose stories get told and listened to, and whose are faded into silence? Oftentimes we tell our own stories out of sense of legacy. We want others to remember us, to remember our accomplishments, and to find significance in our lives. And often we fail to wrestle with the legacies that we have left or that have been left to us. Cone Bradley is a storyteller descended from the original habits of Haida Gwaii, an island off the coast of British Columbia. So travel with me. If you go up to Seattle, Washington, and you go north through Vancouver, over the bridge, keep going north, almost to the very tip of Alaska, where it comes down to the main continent. And then you turn left and go across the Gulf of Alaska, right? There's an island out there whose native inhabitants call Haida Gwaii. That's his lineage. He tells his stories this way. In a Western sense, he says, legacy is a mark a person leaves on history. Statues are raised for the heroes, for those that are revered. In my culture, he says, we see it differently. Our legacy, or the stories told about us, at least internationally, is one of our monumental Haida art. They're the culture of the intricate 40-foot story poles, long houses and canoes, dance masks, which are all internationally renowned and collected. It is, however, he says, our weaving that, in my opinion, is the unsung hero. He says our entire culture and society was supported by weaving, be it clothing, rope for our fishermen, baskets we wove to collect and store food for the winter. When you weave a cedar basket, he says, you have your warps, which cascade down your form, and you have your weft, which spiral continuously around it, incorporating itself over and under to create your basket. People are the weft, trying to find a way around the form, being careful not to miss a step or make a mistake, or for some of us, trying not to unravel altogether. That's how I think of legacy, as the weaving together of our stories passed on as a whole. And he gives this example. He says 250 years ago, there were approximately 20,000 Haida thriving on the shores of Haida Gwaii, so this island in the Gulf of Alaska. By 100 years later, less than 600 remained. It was 250 years ago that an explorer arrived sailing the ship Santiago, the first European to do so. So what was his legacy? Was it the inlet that is named after him on Haida Gwaii, or what our speaker assumes was the unintentional consequences of smallpox, tuberculosis, potlatch bans, residential schools, burning of masks and poles as firewood, or the collectors who came and ransacked the villages? That is the colonial legacy. Cone's legacy, the legacy of the Haida, is that those 600 Haida who stood against the well-oiled machinery of empire survived. He is the descendant of those 600 people whose story he still tells. In this story, we see the tension of legacy and of history, right? His story is one of countless that we could recount from across this continent. And we know that in some tellings of this story, the Haida are the heroes, and in some telling, the Haida are the villains. This is true for each and every one of us. In some stories, you are the villain in somebody's story. In other people's stories, you are the hero. How do we make sense of this? This paradox that we live with, that storytelling is personal. Paradox asks us to live with a both and. It asks us to live in that place where I am both a villain and a hero. Paradox asks us to bring to our community the imagination to have both creativity and discipline, to have humility and audacity, to have freedom and responsibility. We as a people of imagination can do this. So, story paradoxes, we can't ignore them. And knowing these paradoxes exist can empower us. Oh, I lost it. Getting to the good part here. Paradoxes, hard, difficult to do, and empowering, because they help us live with our dignity. Because we can say, yes, I hear you, when someone says our heroes are their villains. It can remind us to have humility, to be open and accepting to others, to welcome all, because we don't know their story. And the stories we tell ourselves about our own worth, our acceptance and belonging, the stories we tell ourselves about our community and those communities over there, the stories we pass on to our descendants and the ones we inherited from our ancestors, these stories matter. These stories create the world that emerges after Once Upon a Time.
Once again, I'm slow too. I'm sitting with the service as you are. Love will guide us. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing.
Okay, where are we in our story? Do we remember? The next day, the gin is coming. We get it? Okay, so the next afternoon, the boy brought together all the water sellers from the square and asked them to give a brass cup, just like his, to anyone who would sit and listen. The gin arrived at the gate and said, "Tell me your tale, and then I will destroy your city at sundown." The boy began the tale, and as he did, more and more people crowded around, and each one was given a brass cup. The jinn again failed to notice the sun setting as the boy told the story, and by the end, the sun had been down for some time, and the crowd gasped to see their own waters filled with cool, clear blue water. "But what about the yarn?" the jinn demanded. "Ah, well," says the boy, "that is a story for another day. If you spare our city tonight, Tomorrow I will tell you the story of the miraculous yarn. The djinn yawned and reluctantly agreed and disappeared back into the desert. The boy then had everyone pour their water into the fountains.
May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing away the light and softly serenade the stars ever dancing circles in the night. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing away the light and softly serenade the stars ever dancing circles in. One more time softly. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing awake the light and softly serenade the stars ever dancing circles. And a last time loudly. May your life be as a song, resounding with the dawn, to sing awake the light and softly serenade the stars ever dancing circles. Ever dancing circles softly. Ever dancing circles in the night. Last time. Ever dancing circles in the night.
Okay, where are we in the story? Yarn, Jin went away. And people are coming to hear the stories. The next day, the entire city circled around the boy to hear his tale, and soon the Jinn arrived as well. Tell me your tale, and then I will destroy your city at sundown. The boy began. His voice rose. The great square fell silent, listening. The audience began pouring their cups of water into the fountain as they filled over and over again with cold, clear, blue water. By the end of the tale, the fountains were gurgling again. The Jinn was so entranced he didn't notice any of this. What clever stories, my boy, but alas, now that it's over, I must destroy your city, he says. But when the sandstorm began to push against the walls, water began to gush from every fountain. The Jinn found himself hopelessly overpowered. With one final roar from the crowd, the Jinn fell back in defeat. At last, he retreated further and further until he was deep in the dunes of the Sahara. And that, said the storyteller, is how the story of how not long ago a young boy saved Morocco from the desert. But what happened to the boy? Asked the small girl in the audience. Ah, well, the story replied with a yink. That is a story for another day. And so too we shall gather for another day. I invite you to go into your day and into your week filled with the water of love and justice and peace and, above all else, community and the warmth gathered here today. Because you are the story of this world. You are the coming of the world to know itself. May you trust that all you ever say or do belongs in the story of this world. Will you please join me in our chalice extinguishing words? We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts, with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in, until we are together again. Yeah, but
children